Gati presents 10th Express Logistics and Supply Chain Conclave in association with Safe Express.
A conference showcasing Asia's largest gathering of supply chain experts under one roof. The event celebrates a decade of existence this year in its 10th edition.
Warm welcome to all of you to the 10th edition of the Express Logistics and Supply Chain Conclave. My name is Kavya R. Chavali. As I extend a very warm welcome to each one of you right here, we'd like to invite the following dignitaries to kindly step forward for the lighting of the lamp. Let's get this program started on an auspicious note. I'd like to request Mr. Dhruv Agarwal, the Chief Strategy Officer of Gati Limited, Mr. Mark Miller, as well our keynote speaker, Mr. Harish Bhatia, and Mr. Matthew Quinn, the President of CHEP, to please come forward for the lighting of the lamp. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to give a head start to the conclave, and I'd like to invite on stage Mr. Dhruv Agarwal, the Chief Strategy Officer of Gati Limited, to welcome all our members of the audience.
Colleagues from the industry, friends from the media, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the organizing committee, I am delighted to welcome all the delegates for the 10th edition of the Express Logistics and Supply Chain Conclave 2016. Over the last decade, the underlying premise of this forum is to connect supply chain professionals and ensure value addition to the logistics field at large by way of pertinent themes, interactive panels, and workshops. More than ever, innovation and technology have extended beyond new products to reinventing our business processes and business models within our industry. Aptly, the theme of this edition of ELSC is Uberization of the supply chain, the age of disruption. The supply chain environment is ever-changing with increasing globalization, advancement of technologies, and development imperatives. Consequently, it becomes important to create a platform for providing thought leadership in supply chain. The ELSC, which is in its 10th year, has successfully provided this forum. With this, I want to acknowledge Harish and his team for spearheading such a large conference and wish this conference a great success. Thank you.
Please help me welcome on stage Mr. Mark Miller.
So what I want to share with you this morning is three aspects. First of all, to look at the evolution of supply chains and how we've moved into an area where we've gone beyond globalization. Secondly, distilling that into 10 key strategic dimensions that I advocate every business anywhere in the world needs to adopt into its supply chain strategy. And then moving on to that, to conclude with a session which really fits in with this Uberization and talk about the omni-channel. I call it a frenzy, but this frenzy that we're in with the omni-channel is ongoing. So supply chains are global, they're complex, and they're strategic. So in this global, complex, strategic world, we've moved beyond the linear concept of a chain. We're now in the world of global supply chain ecosystems, where our company is surrounded by this ecosystem that we've developed in order to deliver an effective and efficient supply chain. So what's happened in recent decades is that the center of economic gravity of the global economy has moved to the east, and that's a shift that is not going to be reversed. And by 2030, 2/3 of the world's middle class will be in the Asia-Pacific. So think about the implications for global, complex, strategic supply chain ecosystems to serve that increasing middle class over the next 15 years.
The day began with a panel discussion on the topic, "The rules of the game have changed. Time to reset your enterprise supply chains."
Welcome to this supply chain strategy track discussion. We constantly innovate and optimize our supply chain network and enterprise resources to maximize customer satisfaction and stay ahead of the game. A game of which we recognize the rules are always changing. And that is exactly the main theme of this session. I now request Mr. Mandeep Sachdev to express his views.
Thanks, Mandar. I think the game has changed a lot, and the customer behavior, what it used to be, is not what it is now. Right? The customer today, depending on what industry you are in, what spectrum or what sector you are dealing with, basically decides what he wants to buy, when he wants to buy, and where he wants to buy. So he is demanding, actually he is demanding a lot of agility from our supply chains. The 4 things that we are actually looking at is lowering procurement costs, lowering our inventory costs, and having a strategic fit between the supply chain strategy and the organization strategy. And finally, the 4th element, which is equally or more important, is what is it that you have as a collaboration with your suppliers. So we have moved, a lot from the relationship spectrum from a vendor to being a trusted partner, and that is where we are heading. The entire thing has changed, and we need to be agile enough, we need to be quick enough, we need to understand and adapt quickly.
I now request Mr. Ryan Vegas to share his views.
Thanks, Mandar. Phenomenal. The entire way the healthcare industry is changing is unbelievable, and you can be monitored wherever you are, anywhere in the world. So it's a complete change of dynamics. Look at Amazon. Nowhere in the world except in India you get cash against delivery. So it's not that you have to do a copy-paste situation. You have to understand the dynamics of the environment and therefore make sure that we are successful.
Let us now also hear from Mr. Pramod Sant about what he feels on this changing rules of the game.
Yeah, thank you, Mandar. In Siemens, if you look at few years back, we were calling as for whole of Siemens there is only one supply chain. The customer changed it and we also changed it. We will find that we are into so many verticals, and for each vertical the customer's expectations or their demand started changing, and somewhere to keep us ahead of all the competition we have to also got a lot of benefits which we could implement. Then you have customers which we were always thinking that they are not demanding, and we could give them a better solutions. So for standard products, switchgear, we could align it in such a way that digitally that our dealer network, which will be going to the end customers, they have the complete visibility of supply chain. Time for some supply chain, the time is very critical. Sometimes reliability is more critical, and you have to balance it. So this become a balancing as what customer wants, you are delivering. What customer is not imagining, that also you are delivering, and making it as really the benchmark across the industry.
I now request Mr. Devdas Nair to express his views.
Thank you, Mandar. Globalization has changed the way the customers shop and buy. Okay, they know what to buy, when to buy, where to buy, and what price to buy. So it is an inevitable for every retailer to reset their supply chain platform. Every year we do customer satisfaction index, we do vendor partner satisfaction index, we also do an employee satisfaction index, and we are trying to keep on improve our efficiency to make our customer happy.
So on that note, I really thank the audience and more importantly our panelists. It was indeed a pleasure, being with the panelists and participating in this interactive discussion.
The next panel spoke on the theme Towards the Value Chain, building the competitive supply chain of the future.
I'll start by talking about ecosystem in which we are currently in. And I think India is at the cusp of transformation. And to look at it in a very positive way, I think growth in India is a no-brainer, because I think growth has to happen. The demographics itself will sort of push us towards growth. So we are already having the foundation of growth. We have a demand side which is very strong, and obviously the supply is picking up. We have so much happening in the infrastructure area, so possibly that is an area which will ease off a lot of the constraints that we have in the supply chain and logistics space. So I go on to my first sort of topic or question that I would like to ask Mr. Krishnan. How do you develop your supply chain into a value chain and generate competitive advantage?
See, I head the function called Demand Chain Management in Mahindra & Mahindra Automotive Division. In fact, it is a very unique exercise they initiated about 7 years back in renaming the conventional supply chain and logistics function into a demand chain management, with a fundamental objective that this function has to play a very critical central role to sales and manufacturing. So the fundamental objective of the division, when it was renamed and it was reset up, I would call it, is to ensure that the customer orders are captured on a live basis, and then your other processes and allied systems in supply chain as well as manufacturing are integrated with the demand. We integrate that orders into the system through a constraint mapping. That's how we look at our integrated supply chain.
Companies have started realizing that supply chain is going to save the world. So there are 7 elements which we look at when we work on building supply chain strategy and the value creation for the company. So one is obviously how do we build a culture. The second C, important C, is customer centricity. The third thing is connect. How do we have connect, internal connect as well as the external connects. The fourth important C is after you connect, you understand what is the requirement and how do you service the requirement. We need to work on building capacities and the capabilities. Compliance is another big important C for us. And then the next 6 C is the cost, and the last is how do you provide a competitive advantage for the industry through the supply chain. So these are 7 C's what we typically look at when we are working on the strategy for supply chain.
I think the key thing that all organizations on both sides, me as a service provider and of course our customers, have to address 3 key points, right, which is convenience, cost and customization. For us to really take supply chain to the next level, our reactions, our addressing of events has to become real time. So I think that's a major step towards evolving the supply chain.
See, service chains are never more important than the product chains, but again, it depends on the industry where it is playing. In an e-commerce industry, service chain is more important. In an electronic industry, service chains, after-sales services for the AMC customer is important. But overall, if you ask me, there has to be a product for a service to take over. So service chains are never going to be really important.
Conceived and managed by Kamikaze B2B Media, Gati presents 10th Express Logistics and Supply Chain Conclave in association with Safe Express. Gati presents 10th Express Logistics and Supply Chain Conclave in association with Safe Express.
There's 2 things happening in the world today. One is populations are growing and they're urbanizing at an increasing rate. And I think both of these factors are having a significant impact on the supply chain and fundamentally changing the way it looks. As the world demands more and more, we're realizing that we're having an increasing environmental impact. So the supply chain is becoming increasingly cognizant of the need to be able to operate not just efficiently but sustainably as well.
Disruption is a way of life now, okay? While there is change on the one hand, there is this increasing scope of supply chain activities as we speak, with more and more activities in the scope in the gamut of supply chain area in general, starting from procurement to planning to logistics to even to regulatory compliance. The supply chain manager of today really has to balance between these challenges of adaptability to disruptions on the one hand and the internal process efficiency gains that he's supposed to deliver on the other.
I think one of the biggest constraints of the road express industry has been in the past the quality of the roads, which is slowly improving as we go along, but equally the checkposts that we have in the system, because they slow down the speed of movement. I think one of the good things that will happen when the GST comes in and there's a unification of markets is that these checkposts will get abolished and road express will see a predictability that they haven't seen so far. I think the other aspect which is changing the industry is technology, because what it is doing is it's putting technology in the hands of every single person.
Technology today is reshaping the logistics industry, and the event featured a panel discussion by some of the top CIOs on the theme, how does the role of the logistics CIO evolve as data, technology and innovation take industry center stage?
First of all, I'd like to thank Harish for choosing this wonderful topic. We are all in a very exciting time, and we are all going through huge amount of disruption. And all this disruption in various industries are being caused by the digital activities. When we say digital, it's a very big word. There is a lot of definitions for the word digital, but we will predominantly stick to the common understanding of social, mobile, analytics, and cloud. Now, this whole disruption was made possible because of somebody's innovation, and that innovation had a background of technology. For example, Amazon. Today, if Amazon has to process so much of items, it requires so much of technology. And all this technology are based on one of these components. I'm going to stop here and go through my panel list, starting from Prakash.
We are one of the world's largest supplier of laminated and plastic tubes. So we supply tubes to Colgate, Unilever. Every tube today, whatever goes out of our factory, traceability is very important. See, we are a large B2B manufacturer, right? Our sale is more to the, directly to the businesses. If I look at the life cycle of the product, it has really shrunk. Earlier what we used to do it in say months, the people actually have a, like he said, right, the business want is within the weeks. The way we today capture the customer requirements, right, in terms of, digitizing the complete platform. Today the requirement comes in a digital format. We process it in a digital format. Give back to our supply chain team in terms of, the sourcing of the raw materials, that is also in a digital format. The process has changed quite a lot. I mean, we keep compressing our, our turnaround time, and we are working towards it.
Which means, from being just a support function, now IT has become the forefront. In fact, they are the first step where most of the companies and the large vendors talk and see whether you have IT capability, because you obviously will have the express distribution, warehouse and logistics capability. So this is what has happened in the role of a CAO, especially in a logistics scenario. So we are in for a big surprise, in for a big change, which all of us, irrespective of what industry we are in, have to gear up to it.
Parallel to the main track, there are 4 industry forums running in tandem for the entire day for both the days. Let's move into one of them, that is Procurement Strategy Summit.
A business leader was on an executive...
The keynote of the day was given by Mr. Clive Govender, CEO, CGC Consulting Service, on the topic, Turning a Crisis into Opportunity. Positioning procurement as a business enabler and a trusted advisor. This forum featured an important panel discussion track on the theme, Strategic Sourcing and Procurement Growth Opportunities.
Strategic procurement is wherever you are dealing with a specific set of suppliers who are important to your supply chain, for running your plant, for running your supplies to the customers. If you have a supplier who is a sole supplier to you, and you have to ensure that his plant or his production facilities are running continuously so that your plant runs. Now, if you don't have a strategy for this supplier, you're bound to fail. Then second case could be like if you have suppliers who are dealing in commodities and much bigger than you, then if you don't play with them with a strategy, your plant will go close someday, because if you're not able to maintain a supply chain, then your suppliers will overcome your interests, and then one day you will find that you are not able to operate. So if you don't have a strategy, if you don't have a plan, which is not for days or months, it should be running into years. If you have long-term contracts with them, visibility is there, only then you can say it is a strategic procurement. You have to have systems in place where you can track each and everything. Internet of Things, which you might have heard, is another buzzword today. 4 or 5 years down the line, you could actually see things happening. Your warehouses, your trucks, even your forklift trucks could be enabled with IoT. And you could get information from that and leverage your supply chain.
As they've told, in fact, from PR to ultimately to placing a order. In fact, it is done through E only. In fact, initially in the beginning of the year, rate contract is fixed. Rates are fixed for a particular item, for a catalog item. So whenever requirement comes, only requirement itself generates PR and ultimately PO on that particular vendor. So therefore, whenever required, the material will come. As far as e-procurement, e-sourcing is concerned, in fact, as a normal practice, we collect bids and we make comparative statement, and e-sourcing separate, there is a team, and that particular comparative statement is given to that team and they handle the e-sourcing process. Okay, so then they do the bidding with the lowest price, whatever is existing now, with the bands. With the bands, 2% less they have to quote every time they keep on, quoting. They keep on, it gets on reducing. Okay, the e-auction ends whenever the last bidder, there is a gap of around 3 minutes. So therefore, we are beyond e-sourcing at present.
Thanks. Thank you.
Third-party logistics typically works on partnerships, and any partnership has to have the 3P as an enabler. He is there to actually help the customer take his business forward. The way to do this is probably with 3 things in mind. One is alignment. We have to be aligned with our customer completely. Second is that it is a partnership of almost equals. So we should also have a voice in that. And third is we should have a comfort, both of us, that whatever we discuss stays in the room. The IP belongs to both of us.
Just a couple of things I think to reinforce. One is the game has changed in terms of the Asian consumer. So the center of economic gravity for the global economy has moved to the east. The second area that the game has changed is that technology has enabled the consumers to have more power, more visibility than they have ever had before. So the balance of power between the consumer and the brands and the retailers has now shifted in favor of the consumers.
So the future of procurement solutions and technology will be more like an onion ring, with the core being the security, followed by another layer of e-commerce technology, and it will grow bigger with financial institutions and logistics providers, everybody becoming a part of the whole thing.
Conceived and managed by Kamikaze B2B Media, Gati presents 10th Express Logistics and Supply Chain Conclave in association with Safe Express. Gati presents 10th Express Logistics and Supply Chain Conclave in association with Safe Express.
India is one of the fastest growing economy now, growing at about 7.5%. But the key factors which are driving the economic growth are actually looking up. The Prime Minister's campaign of Make in India, that's driving the growth. There is this entrepreneurship program of Startup India. All these are leading towards an environment where things are very rosy. I think there would be the substantial growth coming forward in the coming 12 to 18 months' time.
In order to cope up with the changing situations and to come up to the customer's expectations, the logistics leader have to have very, very versatile skill sets, which includes, number 1, adaptability to the changes. Number 2 is how do they collaborate with various other stakeholders. And last but not least, it is very, very important that they have to look into different verticals and specialize on them in order to give the right value to the customer at a right price.
A fundamental paradigm shift is needed for companies to actually shift their focus on the real customer and not have their practices more towards the dealers and the distributors. So today, with the age of e-business and everything coming in, the end customer delivery point has improved quite a lot. So I think if we need to really talk about the overall agility and responsiveness, we need to focus on both the factory to the dealers and distributors and also on the end customer.
What is important for us is open innovation. We think it is very important to build a relationship with startups. There are many startups in Europe, in India too, which are working on new concepts in logistics and in supply chains. We are investing in some startups. For instance, we have a cooperation with a startup which is called Click and Truck. You know, in India or in Europe, trucks are often 20% empty space in the trucks. And so this digital platform is making the link between the customer and this transport company to optimize the transport.
Supply chain leadership in the coming time is going to be the only factor, I would say, or maybe one of the most important factors which will decide your standing in the market. And in the supply chain today, it is also not about just the warehouse team or maybe the supply chain people just alone, all teamwork, and that's the leadership edge which companies will attain when they have all these things synchronized rightly.
The last panel discussion of the day in the main event was the view from the boardroom track. On the theme, the logistics evolution, adapting to shifting models, utilizing disruptive technologies, responding to market changes, and the best route for the future growth of your company.
The first one we're going to explore is technology startups. We've heard about some of this already today. I want to ask Shubhendu to go first on this and give us some insights, your thoughts on technology startups. Are they a threat to traditional 3PL models?
A lot of discussion had happened in terms of a very fast business change in the current environment. And one of the reasons, or one of the key reasons for the change is because of innovation and technology. The logistic business is still, I would say, living in the past, both in innovation and velocity and speed. But it is very, very soon what we see is that few of these very, very ambitious technology startups are going to put a nail on the head, which will bring a massive disruption in the way we do business today.
Let's come to Sushil Ratti on this topic of technology startups.
The question here is whether the technology startups, or why only technology startups, any innovative business model which is coming into play in the traditional 3PL business, is it a risk, is it a threat, or is it an opportunity? And it all depends on how you view this. If one was to say that we should not be worried about this new entrants, I would say you're grossly mistaken. Yes, we should be worried. It's very important to adopt the new technology, integrate some of these things in your current business model to make sure that whatever is the new aspirations of the customer, you're also able to deliver it with the help of these new themes. You would have seen the new business model which are emerging with the help of technology like transport aggregation. There are freight aggregator platforms which are coming into the play, and huge opportunity lies in terms of replicating or collaborating with these kind of companies to make more successful transport operation for their own customer.
Okay, thanks very much, Sushil. So both an opportunity and a threat. So how can we utilize these disruptive technologies and the shared economies to transform the last mile? I'll ask Dhruv to comment on that.
The most disruptive technology that we have not yet utilized to its full potential is still the mobile phone. We did a very interesting project in Gati about 2.5 years back, where we said that we want to move our entire ground operations to tablets and smartphones, right? So the application was great, worked really well, but the problem was that people were not so comfortable yet. I think we haven't maximized the potential of a smartphone, right? Why do we still need to work off of desktops or laptops? Rather we should think about shifting to a mobile workstation.
In this new environment, let's think about the path to growth, okay? How do we explore growth through, for example, through acquisitions or organically or a hybrid approach? Let's ask Abhig to comment.
I think there is an enormous amount of growth opportunity for established players, provided they think with the DNA of startups, provided they bring technology to centerpieces part of their organization, and not look at what somebody else is doing, but look at what technology can provide to them. The other piece, of course, is
what B2C growth is doing to old world B2B players like us. It's forcing us to think differently, because the same buyer who's a B2C consumer is also a B2B buyer on the other side. Why would the two worlds be separate? Why would the two worlds not coincide? So it's, I mean, the third and the fourth are GST-led and road infrastructure-led, which I think will both be beneficial to the overall ecosystem of logistics in India. Growth opportunities will only come if you run this business with the DNA of a startup, using technology as the centerpiece of what you do.
Jasjit, I'm going to ask you to comment on this part of the topic. 3PL customer relationships.
So relationships are different with their customers. In contract logistics, you're more integrated to the overall services, while in express cargo, it is a little bit more of a tariff or of a card rate. If you're relevant to him and with his pace of growth, that is one thing which will retain you. Second thing is, I think, to be agile. We have to be always improving the value proposition, receptive and applying new ideas.
About this logistics service providers, we come to Srinivas now. If I might ask you about your view on the evolution of the logistics service providers in India, and are they being impacted by things like adopting to the shifting models?
Look at DHL or FedEx or a UPS. Have you ever heard of these people launching a disruptive technology to excite the customer? But they are the biggest logistics companies in the world. So what I feel is these companies are relevant because even today, because they're sticking to basics. I feel if logistics companies in India to be relevant in future, I think they should not leave their basics and they should keep innovating processes. Use technology where it's relevant and make it work.
The current economic factors are going to impact driving business over the next 12 to 18 months. So we're looking out a bit. We'll start with Mr. Shankar, please, for an Indian perspective, and then we'll get an international additional perspective from Stefan.
I think there are a few global factors, there are a few macroeconomic factors within India, and there are certain micro factors for our industry, logistics or supply chain industry, which are going to impact business for us. And there's a lot of stalled projects that have started, and also newer projects that are coming on board. So this is definitely going to have a substantial impact for the economy as such. There's going to be a lot of private investment coming in, a lot of capacity unutilized is getting used, and therefore you would see newer investments. So the whole economic cycle of infrastructure-driven growth has started off.
First of all, I'm completely online with what you have just said about India. We have just made a big investment in India, as FM Logistics is the mother company of Spear Logistics, and I'm really optimistic for the logistics industry in India. So now what about the other countries worldwide? I would say situation is improving, but in parallel, unfortunately, the level of risk are also increasing.
Matthew is going to share some insights on the global trends in today's logistics market.
I think a few things that that we're focusing in on. One is standards. The next is how can those standards drive automation and mechanization? Is there any opportunity then for innovation? And these four pieces together are then underpinned by the share and reuse. And that's, I guess, to talk to your point this morning about collaboration in the truest sense of the word. We think if we get these things right, it'll enable a step change in terms of the modernization, not just of the Indian supply chain, but of the global supply chain.
The second edition of the Procurement Excellence Awards were also held post the Procurement Strategies Summit. Some of the award-winning companies were Procurement Excellence in Consumer Packed Goods, Hindustan Unilever Limited; Procurement Excellence in Retail Industry, Arvind Lifestyle Brands Limited; Procurement Excellence in Print Media Industry, The Times of India Group; Procurement Women of the Year, Miss Ranjana Mohapatra, Associate Director, Procurement Asia Pacific, Mondelez India Foods Limited; Procurement Women of the Year, Miss Shanu Kaur, Director, Global Procurement Services, Cisco Systems India Private Limited.
Conceived and managed by Kamikaze B2B Media. Gati presents 10th Express Logistics and Supply Chain Conclave in association with Safe Express. Gati presents 10th Express Logistics and Supply Chain Conclave in association with Safe Express.
We at ProConnect certainly believe in the technology applications in the business that we are in, particularly the supply chain services that we do. Whether it is a warehousing or whether it is transport, import, export, the mission critical services that we do, we apply certain high-end technologies. Example, in warehousing, we apply handheld devices, we apply RFID. So all these really give online tracking, push the tasks to concerned teams that are working, and feedback the information to the customers through the ERP.
I think a lot needs to be done on the warehousing side of things in terms of the automation, so to say. It's all towards automation, having the manless machines, because that's the future, and that is what's going to eventually come to India. We like it or not, probably that's the only way how you can reduce the clutter inside your warehouse and ensure that you are able to cater to the multi-channel and omni-channel strategy of yours, so to say.
Very warm welcome to all of you to the 10th Express Logistics and Supply Chain Leadership Awards. We had an advisory council comprising of 86 members who were responsible to choose our winners for today. Ladies and gentlemen, to do the honors for our first set of awards this evening, I'd like to invite on stage Mr. V.V. Giri, COO, Future Supply Chains, and may I also invite Mr. Harish Bhatia to please come on stage. Can we have a round of applause to welcome our first set of presenters? Best Express Service Provider of the Year, Domestic.
The winner is Gati.
Next category for the evening, Emerging Warehousing Company of the Year.
GRG Reality.
Next category for the evening, which is CSR Initiative of the Year. And the winner is
Mahindra Logistics Limited.
Alright, so that brings us to the next category for the evening. Best Mission Critical Supply Chain Company of the Year.
Critical Log India Private Limited.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next category for the evening, Best Air Freight Service Provider of the Year.
There are two of them, joint winners. Deluxe Cargo India Private Limited.
Joint winner is Hellman Worldwide Logistics India Private Limited.
Ladies and gentlemen, the next category is Best Freight Forwarder of the Year.
The winner is Shankar India Private Limited.
3PL Company of the Year, FMCG.
Future Supply Chain Solutions Limited.
Ladies and gentlemen, the next category is Emerging 3PL Company of the Year.
Innovative Logistics Services Private Limited.
So with that, we come to the end of the first set of awards. I'd like to thank Mr. Rao and Mr. Bhatia for doing the honors. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, our first category in the second set is Excellence in Manufacturing Supply Chain, Oil and Gas.
And the winner is Indian Oil Corporation Limited.
Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the next category for the evening. Excellence in Manufacturing Supply Chain, Retail.
Shoppers Stop Limited.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next category for the evening, Supply Chain Sustainability Award.
Raymond's Limited.
Ladies and gentlemen, now that brings us to our next exciting category for the evening, Supply Chain Innovation of the Year.
And there are three winners, Honda Cars India Limited, Tapukara plant. Next, TCI Supply Chain Solutions. And Siemens Limited.
Moving on to our next category, ladies and gentlemen, Best In-Class Employer of the Year.
Spotan Logistics Private Limited.
Supply Chain People Development Award.
Indus Towers Limited.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next category is Emerging Supply Chain Solution Provider of the Year.
There are two winners, Caliper Business Solutions Private Limited. And the other winner being FarEye.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next category for the evening, Supply Chain Solution Provider of the Year.
CHEP India Private Limited.
Let's get started with our next category for the evening, Customer Intimacy and Service Excellence Company of the Year.
ProConnect Supply Chain Solutions Limited.
That brings us to the next category for the evening, Most Disruptive Startup Logistics Idea of the Year.
The winner is Go Pigeon.
Ladies and gentlemen, the next category is Supply Chain Company of the Year.
The award goes to Safe Express Private Limited.
Huge round of applause for Safe Express Private Limited. Ladies and gentlemen, the next category is ELSC Exemplary Leadership Award.
Deepak Sharma, Vice President Supply Chain Indus Towers.
Our next category is ELSC CEO of the Year.
I invite Mr. Avik Mitra, MD and CEO, Spotan Logistics Private Limited.
Ladies and gentlemen, our final category of the evening, the Lifetime Achievement Award.
For the last 3 years, this award goes to a vertical company and not a service provider. This is the 4th year, and this goes to Mandeep Sachdeva, Indus Towers Limited.
Ladies and gentlemen, can we have a standing ovation? This is the Lifetime Achievement Award.
The evening ended with the 10th edition of the industry's most awaited awards night, felicitating individuals and companies who have excelled over the past 1 year.
I think I would like to take this opportunity to thank some of my mentors, people who have actually guided me in my career, and my one message to the team that I have, or the teams that I have always been with, has been that no job is too big or too small, and learning is a continuous process, and the day you stop learning, you actually stop living. So you take everything in your stride and do things and do them sincerely and keep on learning.
Last but not the least, few words from the man behind this grand event, Mr. Harish Bhatia.
This industry is very close to my heart. 10 years back when I started this event, this was the first event which I started with. It's been a long journey, very emotional, very stressful, full of hardships, but I never gave up. This industry really needs something big, and it's being recognized. This year my theme was Uberization, the age of disruption, because technology, mobility, data is changing this industry too. Something unheard of in the past. When I look back at 2007, and I really feel what was I doing in 2007 was very primitive. I would have never done this today. But today, 10 years, I have come a long way. I have learned a lot. My company has come a long way. And I feel that the next 10 years for this industry will redefine this industry and also establish this industry as one of the top 5 industries in this country and in Asia.
Conceived and managed by Kamikaze B2B Media, Gati presents 10th Express Logistics and Supply Chain Conclave in association with Safe Express.